Welcome to keeba-live. I'm your host, William Lee, podcaster, podcast producer, and the founder of Keeba, the digital network for social media. Today, we're going to do a show that I think is probably one of the most inspirational shows that we've ever had on the air. Just recently, you've heard us talk about the homeless situation. So today, keeba-live will present to you the first of a series of podcasts entitled The Streets of the Homeless. Our first show is going to be with an interview of Janice Wilson. And the Janice Wilson story is a very interesting one, for Janice has and is living as a homeless person in King County. And she stopped into our studio to talk to us today about what's going on and how people look at the homeless. What's the homeless situation like as far as what she sees on an everyday existence. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Janice Wilson story.
My name is Janice Wilson. It was from Crescent City, California originally. And I became homeless in the effort to helping my son, give him the moral support that he needed to at least begin to regroup and recover. We had been separated since he was four years old.
Oh.
And that I had an entrusted family. But the point of the matter is that he was injured severely in King County Correctional Facility.
I see.
And so in that process, I knew that he needed someone in his corner to help him. And because I have disability myself, and understanding that he has ADHD and some other complications, that I knew that he would need somebody to relate with his circumstance as well as what he had gone through, that he would need that kind of support to help guide him. And so anyway, in 2015, I came to Tacoma. I was homeless and I stayed there for a while. It was a beautiful new building, but there were things that I was concerned about. It's a matter of having to wait a long time to get up into there and then having to be concerned about being kicked out for many different vast...
A lot of rules and regulations.
Reason or excuses. And there just isn't a whole lot of compassion and understanding when it comes to people that have mental disabilities, but also that have circumstances that they are totally outside of their own ability of comprehending how things are working inside of the homeless programs, whether they be shelters or be day centers. You're not ready for being homeless. You're not ready to be having to have your socks in one place and your sleeping place in another, or your food in another, or them all being in one place but not being sure if you're going to get caught up in the middle of a situation where you're in the middle of a argument or theft, or somebody's stealing your own personal belongings, the only things you have left, to being kicked out because staff has got an attitude. I mean, these things are real. They're happening. And I went to Seattle because that's where my son was. And that's where he has to respond to court decisions. And for 3 years, he actually snowballed. And I was there right along with him. And in court, what we have to understand is the courts are set for business purposes. They are not set for human relevance or family's voice or somebody who's an advocate or even a mentor. They're not prepared or willing to open up to another person's ability to see what's going on and how that person that's being victim of the systematic snowballing, I call it.
Systematic snowballing.
Snowballing. I call it snowballing because it's a person that has a disability is one thing. A person that has a disability and unable to deal with stress and trauma without proper medication, and they're tossed from, say, the jail or from a homeless situation into the streets in the middle of the night, where they may possibly become victim or they become disoriented or these other circumstances that homeless people often become victims of. The problem is that there's not efficient recognition in dealing with people in these circumstances. and for them to have to cope with the outside, whether it's weather, whether it's not having efficient clothing,
security,
or even food. I mean, food is a major issue. People say, how can anybody, my son almost starved. This is a couple of years back. He said, Mom, I almost starved because homeless people were stealing from him, even the groceries that he would go and get. So he didn't have a place where he could lock them up. Like you might have a house where you're going to lock it up, or you have a place where you can store
it and it's secure.
Yeah, so this is that way with your clothing, with your phones, it's an avid way of people's coping circumstances that you just have to start all over again all the time. And for people that have mental health conditions, sometimes that's overwhelming, that when you go into court to deal with court issues, a lot of times you're already so disorganized and disoriented that it's amazing that you don't just get thrown into a hospital somewhere saying that you're just irresponsible, or that you're so messed up that you can't comprehend. So when we're talking about homeless, really it's going to take society that has compassion enough to donate, not just funds, compassion enough to sit down with the rest of us that are going through these circumstances and really hear what it is that we really need to do to help bridge the gaps that actually cause us to fall fatal. We talk about so many people committing suicide, so many people that are dying on the streets from illegal drug use to somebody injecting them on purpose just to do away with them. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's so many different things that are going on to people. And these are people that just maybe have lost their jobs, or that they just become homeless because they couldn't afford the rent. We're not talking about everybody one size fits all, where people just become drug addicts.
What do you find now you're in Seattle, is that correct? You live up in Seattle?
Yeah, I'm in Seattle. I've been in Seattle now for 3 years.
What do you find up there as far as the people in these outreach programs and things of that nature? Are they taking care of the needs of the people on the streets, or are they just kind of a Band-Aid and they're making themselves look good in the society aspect of it?
Honestly, it really is superficial. One size doesn't fit all. And the conditions and circumstances that people are out there, it's a Band-Aid.
Just a Band-Aid.
Yeah, with a tear in it already, honestly. It's important to get people on board to really sit down and have powwows, talk about. Let's sit down and really have meetings, all the way from pharmaceuticals to food management, people that are caring for that food. I mean, we've had raw meat, pork, given to us, raw chicken, and people getting upset because you bring it to them and say, this is pink. Oh, no, well, it's something, something, something. Oh, no, it's not. We're not stupid. When it causes people diarrhea, it's almost like a fight when you complain or say something about it. I'm not saying there's wonderful people. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
There's phenomenal people that are helping, but those are people that are pretty much being made to be silent, to drag this dragging feet circumstances around. There's so much more we could do, not just to help each other, but to help those who are trying to help us and have been pouring into helping us. That, there's even this thing called the Beacon. Now it's called the Samaritan Beacon, and then actually people can, instead of interrelating and having to communicate with us face to face, they look and see our picture, and they read a little bit of our story, why we are homeless or what we might need, and they can donate funds into that. Now, this is really good because people that have to go to this place, and that place because of court, because of mental health conditions, because they're looking for a place or whatever, they can actually utilize those funds at Safeway. Anybody who is willing to participate in that application for that program is to help be efficient for homeless people, all the way from clothing to places to go rest. $15, I think you can have a place. It's not all by yourself, but it's more like a motel versus, and it's got a lot of people still, but it's quiet. It's a place to rest, take a shower, but a lot of this stuff is not a place for everything, like to wash laundry, to have a place to store your stuff, like you would have a place.
In a home type setting, situation.
Similar. I mean, where you have laundry or, laundry and a place to store your stuff. I have a storage myself now that I get at a pretty good price. But even so, because it's so far away, you still see me with bags. because I'm working all the time on doing creative writings or always trying to study something or do something, even my knitting. A home makes a world difference. A place where you can actually have your stuff closer to where you have to be. It's much more
easier for you, of course.
So when I say about homeless, you're looking at, these are the complicated things that people are taking for granted, that homeless people should be doing more to help themselves. And then you're dealing with the foulness on the streets. I mean, we're talking about not just door to door, wall to wall, people that say, well, what kind of drug do you want? Are you working? And no matter how many times you'll tell them, no, I'm not. Eventually they do get it that you're not on drugs and that you're not a prostitute. But at the same token, you're still having to deal with all the things that are going on, and that so many of the business places, as well as City Hall and county, could do so much, because the foulness in the streets is not even if you have homeless people there, it is not a welcoming place for any stranger to come to. They
pretty well keep their guard up against the outside world. Is that what you mean?
It's kept in a professional altitude. It's kept foul.
Kept foul, okay.
Kept foul. The streets, the sidewalks, the walls of the businesses are kept foul. They'll splurge around the debris when they're pressure washing, but it's not cleaned.
So they're just doing kind of a makeshift get-by
cursory
type situation because you're homeless, who cares type.
In those areas, that are visited by the homeless that are there, that it's just a place where we have to pretty much be for food. All these different places are pretty much kept in the ways that are not welcoming for anyone, as well as not being health maintained for the amounts of people that are in there. And that's the same thing with a lot of these day shelters and night shelters. Clean environment, we have to do it, but how do we do it when we know how to do it, but that the professional people are. But there's a lot of foreigners that come here. Now, it's nothing bad about people coming from other places. But when you don't professionally, properly train them, and they possibly are doing it the way that they might do it back home with the lack of water and the lack of
sanitation and things of that nature,
then they're not doing it professionally to prevent illness, to prevent bugs, problems, to prevent these things. And it's just a cesspool of insects.
Okay.
We're talking about horrific illnesses from these bed bugs and these places that could be efficiently, professionally cleaned areas where homeless are having to reside. Whether it's outside or inside, it's all the same.
This concludes part 1 of The Streets of the Homeless with Janice Wilson. Please stay tuned next week for part 2 as Janice talks more about what life is like for the homeless on the streets in Seattle.